In the luxurious space of a high-class restaurant, melodious music resounds, blending with the seductive aroma of the food. The soft lighting creates a cozy, comfortable atmosphere. This is one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, which not only serves delicious food, but is also a destination for those who love quiet and privacy. In a hidden corner, a small dining table is placed by the window, where the light from the sparkling lamps reflects on the shiny silver items. Here, a middle-aged man, wearing a polite black suit, is sitting opposite a young girl. The man is named James, a white man, elegant, and always attracts the attention of everyone around. The girl, named Ava, is only 14 years old but is wearing an outfit that is a bit oversized, making her look a bit sloppy compared to her age. Ava looks awkward as she sits opposite a strange man. Although there was a gentle smile on her face, her eyes revealed a lack of confidence. Her outfit was not tailored, the skirt was a bit too long and loose, and the imperfect seams made her look a bit sloppy. But Ava didn't care about that. She sat waiting for James and seemed to listen to him very attentively. The waiter approached their table. He looked at Ava inquiringly, his eyes lingering on her outfit. When he bent down to hand over the menu, he couldn't contain his curiosity and asked in a gentle but abrupt voice, "Excuse me, but you can't be the father of this girl, right? How could a man like you have such a daughter? She doesn't look very good." James paused for a moment, then looked at the waiter, his expression immediately changing. He frowned, feeling the insult in his words. Angry, James raised his hand, slamming the menu down on the table with a loud sound, causing the surrounding space to suddenly become silent. "I may not be her biological father, but I love her like my own daughter. She is everything to me," James affirmed proudly, his eyes shining as he looked at Ava, who was sitting quietly but could feel the warmth in his gaze. All the diners in the restaurant, from the people sitting around to the waiters, paused for a few seconds. They could not understand the strange relationship between James and Ava, but one thing was clear. James's love for Ava was unconditional and intense. Even though there was no blood connection, his feelings for this girl were beyond dispute. But no one could know that Ava, the girl sitting there, was not only James's adopted daughter, but also a part of a complicated story that both of them were living in. A story that, if exposed, would surprise everyone. Ever since he adopted Ava, James has decided to raise her in a special way, unlike anyone else. Even though Ava is still young, only 14 years old, James has his own plans for her future. One of the first things he does is force Ava to wear outdated clothes from the past decades. Not modern or trendy clothes, but classic long dresses, oversized coats, and old-fashioned high heels. Ava doesn't understand why James asks her to wear such clothes. Some of the dresses seem too old, too outdated for her age, but she doesn't dare to protest. James always tells her that those clothes will help her stand out from the crowd, that they show timeless elegance and luxury. Ava just obediently follows, even though those clothes make her feel embarrassed. One day, when she tried on a gorgeous, oversized, dark blue dress, James complimented her again. "That's my daughter, Ava. This dress suits you so well. You'll definitely be an icon of elegance like the ladies in the pictures I showed you." In fact, Ava never had the chance to access modern fashion trends. James banned her from using the internet and mobile devices. Instead, he gave her old magazines from the 80s and 90s. He wanted her to live in a bygone world, a world without the temptation of useless things like social media or peer influence. Ava felt lost in that world, but there was nothing she could do but continue to follow James's instructions. In addition to the outdated outfits, James also hired a makeup artist to teach Ava how to apply makeup in the style of previous decades. Ava learned to paint her face with thick layers of makeup and bold red lipstick, which did not match her innocence. Once, when Ava attended a friend's birthday party, she wore a poodle dress with thick makeup and old-fashioned high heels. Her friends looked at her with puzzled eyes. Some of them couldn't help but ask directly, "What's wrong with you? Your outfit looks like it's from the 90s. Why don't you wear something more modern?" Ava just smiled, her eyes sparkling with pride even though she knew she was the center of gossip. She answered firmly, "This is the new trend. My dad said it would suit me very well." Her answer stunned everyone around her. No one said anything more. Although she was a little embarrassed, Ava still felt a strong belief in James's words. She believed that he was the only one who understood her, and that everything he did was for her. Little did she know that while James was taking care of every detail of her life, he was painting a perfect picture in his head, a picture that she would never be able to escape. When Ava turned 18, a milestone in her life, she felt more mature and started to want to do something special for James. She wanted to prove to him that, despite all the strangeness in her upbringing, she was still grateful to him and loved him as a real father. She planned to prepare a surprise gift for him on his birthday. One morning, when James had left for work, Ava decided to sneak into his private room. She knew that she had never been in his room alone before. Although she was full of anxiety and nervousness, she decided to do it. She not only wanted to find a gift for herself, but also wanted to understand more about the private life of the man who had raised her all these years. James's door creaked as Ava opened it. His private room was neat, with simple but delicate decorations, showing a disciplined and neat person. Ava walked in, her eyes scanning every corner of the room. A photo on the bedside table caught her attention. In the photo, a woman with dark skin, a beautiful face, and a warm smile was standing next to James. She looked very much like Ava. Ava suddenly felt a chill run down her spine. The feeling of curiosity, for some reason, overwhelmed all other emotions. Ava picked up the photo and looked at it carefully. Although the photo had signs of age, she still couldn't believe what she was seeing. The woman in the photo was none other than her mother, and the truth was clear that the mother was not a stranger. She was Ava's biological mother. Suddenly, an old album nearby caught her eye. Ava gently opened it. Inside were old photos of James and that woman. Each photo showed happy moments, smiles, and trips together. But what made her shiver was the last photo. It was different from the other photos, as it was partially torn, but the image of a woman holding a newborn baby in her arms was still recognizable. Ava felt a chill sweep over her mind. The baby in the photo was her, but the woman was not the one who had raised her all this time. Ava could no longer continue flipping through the pages of the album. She quickly put it down and looked around, feeling as if everything in the room had suddenly become unfamiliar. Her heart pounded as she began to realize the painful truth about her past. James was not her father, at least not in the traditional sense. He was not only her adoptive father, but had a deeper and more complicated relationship with her mother. Ava couldn't stop. She continued searching, and soon discovered a diary that James had left in a desk drawer. Her hands trembled as she opened the diary, the words on it painting a very complicated picture of the relationship between James and her mother. She read through a few pages, and the truth gradually emerged clearly. Her mother, the woman in the photos, had been James's girlfriend when he was young. They were deeply in love, but their love did not last. When her mother decided to leave James for another man, James could not bear it. He planned to make her suffer. even using a car accident to ruin the life of the man her mother loved. The accident resulted in the death of her parents, and it was from that moment that James began to raise her with one purpose: to replace the mother who abandoned him. Ava felt sick and confused. She felt like she was a pawn in a game she had never known. She clutched the diary in her hands, unable to believe what she had just discovered. James had raised her, not out of genuine love, but because he wanted to turn her into the shadow of the woman he could never have. Ava's mind was spinning in panic. But before she could make a decision, she heard James's footsteps outside the door. She quickly put the diary back in the drawer and quietly turned around, trying to calm herself down. Ava stood rooted to the spot, her heart pounding in her chest. Panic and fear gripped her, but she couldn't stop. She had found the truth, and now she had to face it. Everything she had believed in was crumbling like a sand castle, and she knew that she could never go back to her peaceful life. In a split second, she heard James's footsteps outside, the sound of him pacing down the hall. Ava quickly adjusted her dress, then turned back to put the diary back where it belonged. Although she tried to stay calm, she couldn't help but worry about being discovered, especially when she knew that after all the secrets James had kept from her, she couldn't continue to pretend that everything was okay. The door opened slightly, and James walked in. He smiled when he saw her, but it didn't seem as easy as before. There was something in his eyes, a restraint, something he was hiding. Ava tried to force a smile, but deep down she knew this confrontation was inevitable. "What have you been doing in here?" James asked, his voice soft, as if he had no idea what she had discovered. Ava looked at him intently. She couldn't lie anymore, couldn't continue to live in the shell James had created for her. It was clear to her, and the truth was that she couldn't continue to live in his shadow, couldn't continue to be a tool in a plan she didn't know about. "Father," she hesitated, then slowly said, "Why do this? Why raise me if I was just part of your revenge plan?" James paused, his eyes darkening. Ava couldn't help but notice the sudden change in his expression. He seemed to be trying to contain his anger. After a long moment, he spoke, his voice low and calculating. "You don't understand, Ava. It's a long story, and not something you should know." He stepped toward her, so close she could feel his breath. She took a step back, the air feeling suffocating. Even though she was no longer a child, his threat still made her tremble. "But you have to understand, I did everything I could to take care of you," James continued, the gentleness in his tone only making his words more terrifying. "I created a world for you, a world where you didn't have to endure the evils this world brought. I love you, Ava, and I only want you to live in the reality I built for you." Ava felt a surge of disgust. She turned away, not wanting to hear the lies anymore. Everything was wrong. What he did was not out of love, but out of obsession, out of adoration for a woman who had left him, and now he was trying to replace her through her own daughter. "And about my mother, why did you do it?" Ava interrupted, her voice choked. "Why did you kill her? You ruined my life. What did you do it for?" Ava's words were like a slap in the face to James, making him stop. His eyes darkened, but then he just smiled. This smile had no warmth anymore. "You don't understand. She was the only person I ever loved, and when she left, I couldn't bear it. I did what I did for love, for the pain of loss." Ava looked straight into his eyes, hers filled with hatred and pain. "For love? You took my parents' lives. You let my mother die for another man. You don't love anyone. You only love yourself." Her words were like a blow, making James look unsteady. He took a step back, his eyes showing madness. "You wouldn't understand. No one could understand me. No one but her." Ava felt like she had nowhere to run. She couldn't let herself fall into James's hands any longer. But just then, a noise from outside the door broke the silence. Ava looked toward the door, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. A feeling of suffocation enveloped Ava as she saw James standing before her, his eyes like burning flames. She knew that she could not continue to face him in this room any longer. Ava looked into his eyes, but there was no fear, only determination and anger. She knew everything, and now she had only one choice: to escape his control. As soon as she heard the noise from outside the door, she blinked, then turned towards the door. A glimmer of hope flashed in her heart, the hope that she could finally escape James, the man she once considered a father, but now just a man haunted by the past and loss. She walked quickly out of the room, clutching the gift bag she had prepared for James, now a symbol of fragile hope in this dark situation. Her heart pounded, each step echoed in the hallway, when she heard James following behind. "Ava!" "You can't go." James's voice rang out behind her, but this time it wasn't as soft as before. Instead, it was full of menace and anger. Ava didn't stop. She ran fast, trying not to be caught. Her footsteps were urgent, but she couldn't stop. She had to go. She had to get away from him. When she reached the stairs, Ava suddenly stopped. She didn't have a clear plan, but she knew one thing for sure. She had to get out of this house, out of James's grasp. She looked down at the bag in her hand, then turned her head to look at the stairs. She couldn't hide in this house forever, and James's words echoed in her head, like fire burning her mind. James stepped closer, but didn't seem to stop. She could hear his breathing, his footsteps quickening like a predator stalking its prey. Suddenly, Ava saw an open window at the end of the hallway. She didn't think much more, immediately ran and jumped through the window without hesitation. It was a reckless decision, but she knew she had no other choice. Outside, it was dusk, the dim lights of the city like a mask hiding everything. Ava quickly rushed out, leaving only the sound of James's footsteps fading away behind. She didn't dare to look back, only focused on running as fast as she could, not stopping for even a second. She ran through the deserted streets, not caring where she was. Just having to get away from James was enough. With every step she took, the feeling of tension and fear increased. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't turn back. She had to get away from James, not only for her freedom, but for her own life. When she entered a deserted alley, Ava stopped, breathing heavily. She leaned against the wall, feeling the exhaustion and tension bursting out. She had no more strength to run, but even so, she felt a small hope rising in her heart. At a nearby coffee shop, she decided to go in and sit down. She needed to think about what to do next. She couldn't face James on her own anymore, couldn't continue living in fear. But just then, as she sat down and began to calm down, a familiar figure walked into the shop. Ava looked up, feeling as if everything in her head had suddenly stopped. She saw a young woman, a waitress at the restaurant she had gone to for her birthday party, the same person she had met before. The woman had dark skin, her eyes filled with sympathy as she stared at her. The woman approached Ava, gently placing her hand on her shoulder, as if she understood the pain in her heart. "Are you okay?" the woman asked, her voice soft but firm. Ava looked at her, not saying anything right away. She felt like she had found a light in the darkness. For the first time in a long time, she felt genuine concern from an outsider. The woman was not an old acquaintance. but she seemed to understand Ava's situation. "Thank you," Ava said in a ragged breath, tears starting to fall from her eyes. "You are the only one. You are the only one who understands me." The woman just smiled and nodded. "I will help you. You are not alone." And at that moment, Ava knew that, with the help of this woman, she could find a way out. She would no longer have to face James alone. Ava couldn't believe it as she sat across from the woman. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but this time they weren't from fear or despair, but from something different. A sense of empathy, a glimmer of hope, a promise of release. This woman, whom she had only met once at a birthday party, was now the only person who could help her escape the nightmare that had been hers for so many years. "You're not a child anymore, Ava," the woman said, her voice soft but firm. "You don't have to endure someone else's control, deception, or pain. You have control over your own life." Ava looked at her, her eyes filling with tears, but these weren't tears of fear, but of gratitude. She nodded, and a sense of relief washed over her. "Thank you," Ava choked out. "You don't know how scared I was and how I didn't know what to do. But you helped me realize that I could start over." The woman just smiled, a genuine, comforting smile. "We can all start over, no matter how painful the past is. You don't have to live in the shadow of it anymore." As Ava stood up, she felt strangely strong. She no longer felt like a weak girl, no longer a victim of a dark plan. She was herself, a grown woman with a new determination, to build a new life, not to be determined by anyone. She followed the woman out of the cafe, and they got into the car to leave the city. During the ride, Ava couldn't help but think about what she had been through. Every step away from James's house, every mile, she felt like she was escaping from a nightmare. But at the same time, she knew that she could never forget everything that had happened. It had shaped her. It had made her stronger. After a while, Ava found a non-profit organization that helped abused and abandoned children. This was where she found peace of mind, and it was also where she decided to devote all her energy to helping children who had nowhere to go. She felt that this was the only way to heal her heart, to help children like her who were not given the love they deserved. As time passed, Ava became stronger and more determined. She founded a charity that specializes in supporting orphans and children in difficult circumstances, especially ethnic children. With the help of the new friends she met during this time, she did what she thought was impossible: create a better world for children who had no choice, like she did. She also did not forget about James. After escaping from him, she reported what he had done to the police, and with the help of the woman at the coffee shop, she handed over James's diary to the police. The diary contained all the details of James's crimes, including how he had arranged the accident that killed her parents and the dark plans he had planned to carry out on her. Thanks to that, James was arrested and convicted, and finally, justice was served. Despite being free from James and all the pain of the past, Ava still had to face the fact that the wounds could not be healed immediately. However, she was no longer the weak girl she used to be. She was able to face her past, face the truth, and walk on the path she chose. The children she helped, the people she gave hope to, were the motivation for her to continue moving forward. Ava found freedom not only in her body, but also in her soul. She knew that, although life may never be perfect, at least she could control her own future. And so, Ava's life turned a new page. She was no longer the daughter of a haunted man, but a strong woman, capable of changing the world. Ava had overcome the ghosts of her past, and now she was the light for the children forgotten in the darkness.